Okay, so some of you might be familiar with recommender systems. This is what I'm going to talk about. So maybe you recognize this title, this absurd title. If you like data and beers, you will like DataBeers. This is typically how you get your recommendations in Amazon. So tonight I'm going to talk about what the systems are and how we use them in Shipstead to give better user experiences for our users. So Shipstead, maybe you haven't heard this strange name before, but it actually has some news sites in Scandinavia and also marketplaces all over the world. So in Spain we have sites like Vivo, InfoJobs or Fotocasa are part of the Shipstead group. So recommender systems are systems that help users to discover information that generally in cases where there's lots of large amounts of data, so they help bring information that is relevant to them based on their past behavior. So it's similar to search, but instead of having to do a query, the information comes to the user in the form of a recommendation. So some examples of recommenders are Netflix, which recommends you movies, LinkedIn, which recommends you jobs based on your CV and based on your connections, and also Facebook, which personalizes your information feed based on your connections with people. So how do these systems work? Basically, they try to model relationships that users have with items. So here, it's a simple example with beer. Basically, what we're trying to do is to find users that are similar to other users and then try to predict what items they will like in the future. So if we put this data into a matrix, we can compare users, and here we can see that the first and the second user have 50% of the items in common. So then we can think, okay, if the second user has seen also the Bogdan beer, then maybe the first one will also like it because they're similar. So then I can give this type of recommendation. If you like this beer, you might also like Bogdan beer because users that are similar to you also like it. This is a type of algorithm that uses transaction data, in this case consuming a beer, for example. But we also have other algorithms like that look at content. So they try to see what features or what attributes of products users like. Those are called content-based recommenders. And in the last years, we as users, we've been generating a lot more data. When using Twitter or Facebook, we are generating social data. We write product reviews or we tag content, and we also share contextual information when we have our phones with us and we can share the location. So this means that it's very exciting times for recommenders because there's a lot of data that we can use to offer better user experiences. So how do we build these systems? Well, the idea is to start very simple. So you don't want to start with something really great. You just want to put something out there and make the users try it. And then you move on from there and you try to improve it in order to improve the user experience. So I'm going to talk about some of the qualities that are important to give these wow user experiences. So this is what we're doing at Shipstead. We try to personalize the user experience in news sites and also in marketplaces. So as you can imagine, there are two very different domains, so they need to take into account different needs. But basically, the qualities that we're looking at are the same, which are things like trying to provide diverse recommendations or being context aware. So I'm going to show you now some examples of how each of these qualities is important for our domains, news and marketplaces. So context is very important, especially for marketplaces. And what we found is that using location, it's not about distance, it's about convenience. So if I'm a buyer, I'm looking for a sofa, I want the seller to be next to me, like close to me, because it's a nuisance to carry a sofa. But if I want to buy a video game or a phone, I don't care so much about where the seller is, so because they can ship it to me. So it's important to include this knowledge into the recommender. Another quality is freshness, and this is very important for news. So there are articles like a metro delay that are only valid for a few hours, while others, they live for a long time, they're relevant for a longer time, and the system should also be able to recommend them for a longer period of time. And then we have diversity. So this is very important because a lot of recommenders, they just recommend you items that are very similar to what you've seen before. So you're not discovering much. So it's important to recommend items that are similar, but also related items or even novel items. So this means things you have never seen before or things you haven't seen in a particular site. Novelty is very relevant for our marketplaces because we have some users that they only explore one category, like electronics. So it's important for us to move those users to explore new categories by showing them items from other interesting categories to them. I forgot what was next. Oh yeah, so you can improve the novelty by exploring the long tail. So here you can see that the items on the left, they're very popular. They get lots of context on our sites. But then we have this long tail, which is 2/3 of our items, that are harder to find the audience for. So this is challenging for a recommender system, especially as we move towards the end of the tail, where we get really unique and weird items. So these are some crazy examples. We have a turtle that has been reproductive for 10 years that they're selling. We have a service that offers a transformation from man to woman. And we have really crazy people that sell used underwear. So as you can imagine, it's very hard to target the right audience for these cases. And even worse, if we recommend them to the wrong people, they can get really offended, and this would be an awful user experience. So this is also related then to the concept of trust. The user needs to feel comfortable with the system. They need to understand why you're recommending something to them, that you do it because you think it's relevant and not because somebody paid for that content to be there. If that's the case, you need to say it. And a good way to increase trust is by using explanations, saying, okay, we recommend you these items because they're similar to the ones you've seen before. And also using social explanations is very useful. So saying, you might be interested in contacting the seller because your friends did before. So this is just a quick summary of some of the important things that we look at when we build systems. And just as a recap, to note that it's important to keep the domain that you're working on when you design the systems. Also focusing on the user experience. So a lot of people just focus on getting more clicks, but it's important to look at other qualities. And finally, having a recommender system, it's not something that you just build once. It's something that requires being careful about and keeping it, maintaining it. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.